Good evening, it's Eva. I'm going to talk sort of heart to heart tonight about really answering a question that somebody asked me due to some of the traumatic stories that I have posted on YouTube. And they wanted to know, like, how did I survive some of these experiences and still have a positive attitude and not be angry or like a shell of a person, really. Somebody who just wasn't happy anymore. And the truth of the matter is, the answer is that I love life so much. I enjoy being alive. I think it's the most phenomenal gift in the world. Even when things suck really bad, I'm like, I can still see something beautiful. It could be just a rose bush. It could be anything, an animal coming up to me that's, adorable. It could be like someone singing on, on an iPad. It could be anything. Like, I don't want to lose all that amazing life just because some people, strangers and family, which I'll get into when I tell the stories, had kind of the opposite feeling about life. They had something in them that was dark, something in them that was angry, something in them that was hateful and greedy and wanted to assert their will on someone else to make them feel powerful. I don't want their urge to define themselves, to destroy my identity. And I know those are just words, but I'm going to explain to you how and why I did it that way, how I was able to sort of put this into practice. And honestly, I'm super nervous tonight because this isn't something that I thought up. It's not like I thought after one really shitty, horrible nightmare happened to me that I was like, oh, well, next time this happens, I'm going to come up with some sort of strategy to, prevent myself from getting hurt this bad. That's not what happened. I just prayed to God because honestly, once you hear some of these stories, I didn't have any siblings. I was born into a family, a tiny family, with two mentally ill people, one of them severely because she wouldn't take medication, which is my biological mother. And the second incident that I'm going to talk about tonight, there was, a multitude of other ones, but these are just the two I'm going to discuss tonight. The other ones, what the title says, it was a robbery and it was a setup. And I was like handpicked, I guess, out of like, they were like, it was three men. They were picking which woman to rob. And I guess they had gone with a different one. And then the night before or something, I just sent a text to the date guy. I call him that just because he's the one who was going on the date. And I don't know what I said. I don't even remember. But whatever it was, they decided that I was naive, more naive than perhaps the other victim that they had selected. So they went with me instead. They switched it up. So little did I know that the next day, which was going to change my life forever, because I ended up with a traumatic brain injury, that it was all set in motion that night by complete strangers. And the other really shitty, horrific experience I'm going to talk about is when I was 4, my mother had run off with me twice because she was paranoid schizophrenic and she was not on her medication. And every once in a while she would like just sort of take off with me. I don't know what my dad, if he tried to find us, or I don't know. I mean, it was like dial-up phones back then, and nothing like they have now. Like, you couldn't just find somebody. You couldn't hit location and find them. So anyway, the second time that she took off with me, she ended up slamming my head open with a blunt object, and I was 4.5. And so I ended up in the hospital, obviously. She ended up arrested, big surprise. And then, that one kind of had a happy ending where her parents kind of swooped in and adopted me. And I didn't have to live with her anymore. But it wasn't all that. That part was a relief, but it wasn't good in other ways. Like, I had to leave Florida, and I had already left Connecticut, and I was, I guess at that point, not really attached to one place, because I had lived kind of like, what would happen is my mom would do something terrible and then we would have to leave. Like our house in Connecticut, she set it on fire. So it was to have a fresh start that we went to Florida. So when we were in Florida, the first time she kidnapped me, I don't know, she drove us somewhere. I don't know if it was Tampa or St. Pete, but what I do remember, because I do remember being in the car with her, and then I also remember the next day, because we stayed up all night, and that morning we were found walking on the train tracks, completely naked, holding hands, and the police arrested her, and then they put me in a foster situation temporarily until they could figure out if there was another caretaker or another family member. And my mom was often incarcerated, but it was always brief periods of time. I mean, she'd be for like disorderly conduct or traffic violations that were, I remember once I was with my grandparents, we were driving to Florida to visit her, and this is when after I moved in with them, and I always had to go back there a couple times a year, even though, sometimes 3 times, even though I was terrified of her, and honestly would just be in fear the whole time. But one of the times we were driving down the highway, and there was a huge pileup of cars, like the outskirts of the city, and my grandmother and the other family member in the car were like, oh my God, what's going on? Like, who's holding this up? And then when we finally, I don't know why my grandmother did this, but she did something crazy. Like, she went in the side lane or something and scooted ahead. And when we got to the front of the line, it was my mom. And she was just smoking away, and talking to herself, because she only really communicated to the voices in her head. She really had a incredibly difficult time getting out of that world and communicating with us in this world. Like, it was very difficult to get her out of that. And so the police came, and, that's just an example of times that, we experience. So the second time, like I said, that she took me, and I don't know what she hit me with, but my grandmother basically let the family know that there had been a car accident, and that maybe I had been, not maybe, but her story was that I had been in the front seat and hit the glove compartment, and I didn't have a seatbelt on or something like that. But I remembered it. That's the thing, because I was almost 5, and honestly, I can remember stuff from the fire, and I was only 3 then, because I remember being in the bathtub, and my dad was giving me a bath, and then I just remember him taking just anything he could, just scoop up water and go try to put the fire out, because he didn't even know. He just, turned around and saw it and smelled it, and I don't know why somebody would set a fire in their own home when their child is there, but that's kind of just how it was. She really didn't. I have anger towards her that I'm working through. She's passed away since, but most honestly, I have more fear than anger, because I was just so terrified of her. And I've talked about that in other videos, about what it really felt like to be the only child of a schizophrenic, and what that's like, when back then there was like no internet. It's not like as a little kid I was getting any kind of book or anything that was going to tell me what mental illness was, and all the relatives would not speak about it at all. They would just pretend like it wasn't happening. So I literally had to figure it out by myself. Like, what the hell was it going through? And that's how I kind of became, not kind of, it's how I developed the powerful, incredibly close relationship I have with God, to be perfectly honest, because like I said, I had no siblings. And when I was living with my parents, if you're living with 2 people, my father was bipolar, but he took his medication and he was much more functional. And I think, as I remember it, he was the one who played all the games with me and put me to bed and did all the stuff when I was little, before I was adopted. But he was on lithium and he was bipolar. He also had hallucinations if he didn't take his medication. So I couldn't talk to them. I couldn't talk to friends, because if you have 2 mentally ill parents, they're not sending you to school. I was born at home. My dad got a library book because they didn't believe this is coming off the late 60s, early 70s. My parents were really hippies, and they were anti-government, and so my mom considered, like, to have a baby in a hospital would be like, the CIA would deliver it and the FBI would, like, take her to jail or something. Like, she did not believe in any, she didn't believe that other people, she thought other people were like government agents, or she thought, like the President of the United States was the Empress of China. She just believed, just things that are, as I say them, it's just ludicrous, but that was just a normal day. So anyway, what happened with the Tinder date was, I went to a public park because we were supposed to meet at a restaurant, And then at the last, like, I guess 15 minutes before we were going to meet at a restaurant, because we were both driving towards each other, like a meeting place in the middle. And I was a smoker then, but I've never really been like a daily smoker at all, and I never do it now, or I haven't for years. But well, I guess that was like almost 6 years ago. But at that time, I had just gone through a really, I'll use it again, traumatic divorce after like 20 years. So I was stressed out, very stressed out, and so I did start smoking just every once in a while to just sort of take the edge off, but I would not in any way say that it was something I did all the time. Anyway, since he did too, he said randomly, like, oh, let's meet at this park because it's, right next to, the downtown, and then we can figure out where we want to go. And so I pulled into the park, and he was not there yet. And I just walked around. There were some people there. There was like somebody on the playground set, and there was probably more cars than people, because there were people. There was a basketball court down the way, and it was a large park. And then he pulled up in this big truck. And then he came and sat in my car, and we were just rolled the windows down. We were smoking up. And then he asked if we could move to a different part of the park, which was actually not that far away, but it had a tree over it where you couldn't really see around the tree very well. And so at the time I thought it was weird, but I didn't listen to my inner voice. I didn't listen. So we went and parked there, and then not but 10 minutes later, or maybe even less, maybe 8 minutes, a car came, and it backed up so that it was blocking my car, so I couldn't move or get out if I wanted. And then two guys in ski masks came up to the car and both told us that give them our money and our him his wallet and phone, and me car keys, wallet, phone, purse. And so we did that. The guy who was on my side, he was just super scrawny, and he looked sick, honestly, like he was ill. And he looked really young and like terribly emaciated. So I thought maybe he was a drug addict or something. And as they were about to go back to their car and drive off, I was sitting there at the steering wheel, and I was so angry. And all I could think about in that fraction of a minute or whatever it was that when I was 18, I had been raped at college, and they found out who it was, and there was a case against him, and I was dealing with the police a lot, and had a lawyer and all that. And ironically, it had taken place at a park, so I don't know what it is with me in parks, but it doesn't make me want to go visit one anytime soon. And so in those few moments, I decided, because I had dropped the case when I was 18, because honestly I was petrified of how much attention I had already received. Like, they put it in the campus paper, and I had, everybody knew about it, and I had, all my family, and I felt like ashamed and humiliated. And all you do when you're a rape victim is tell people like these extremely graphic details, like the police want, every single detail it's got to be excruciatingly explained. And so at that age, I couldn't handle the thought of like having to go to a trial or something and having to say that stuff. And then Just some other stuff happened. Maybe I'll get into that in another video, but anyway, I decided at that moment as I was gripping the steering wheel that I couldn't live with myself if I didn't fight back. So I got out of the car and I sort of chased a little bit the scrawny guy, and I yanked the purse as hard as I could. And when I did that, because my car keys were in it too, so it's not like I could drive off and go home or anything. And when I did that, I guess they were going to come back and get the car later. I have no idea. When I did that, his ski mask came off. And he got so angry, and we yelled at each other. And then he like pointed the gun towards me, but it was down. But I didn't hear him. He said he was going to pop me. Okay, so then I didn't hear him cock it, and I knew that you had to do that because when I had been, I don't know, my early 20s, I had gotten in a really bad space. It was with, I don't know, it was with this boyfriend who was, you know, a bad guy or whatever. And we got into drugs. It was a shitty time of my life. I mean, it was about 3.5 years of my life that were horrible. And at this time, he and I had broken up, and he was still back out west, but I was living in the Lower East Side in New York, and I had a drug habit at that time. And I've never had any craving for anything like that since I got clean then, and it's, you know, it's been, I don't know, over 25 years, if not longer. So anyway, what was I telling this story? Oh, I was telling this story because one of the times I went to go score drugs on this, you know, street, I'm not loving telling this about myself, but I had approached a car, I guess because there was a big line where I was, and the guy had rolled down the window, and then we were trying to do an exchange, and I hadn't given him the money yet, and I guess I was bartering with him. I don't know what I was doing, but he put a gun in my face. And he rolled on the one, and I heard him cock it back, right? So I knew it was loaded, and I remember, you know, like in slow motion, I took the cash I had and I just threw it all at him, and like as I did that, he still had his hand out like that, but they sped away, and I sort of saw the window closing and like him lifting it back. So don't ask me why, but at that moment with this situation at the park, with the Tinder situation, right? I remembered that. Like, I'm not even kidding you. Like, that's how fast your brain works when you're being like assaulted. I guess you have this almost like supernatural ability to like, it's like speed thinking or something. Like, I remembered the rape, and then I remembered that about the gun, and then I realized he hadn't done that. And so I thought, oh shit, I bet it's empty. And of course, if somebody sticks a gun in your face, you're not like, you know, oh, is that loaded, sir? No, you just assume it is, right? Now, I didn't know for sure. That was just my assumption based on my, you know, amazing back history there. And what happened then? And he got so pissed when I was yelling at him, real mad. And that I had, because when I had pulled the purse, he had fallen on the cement and his ski mask came off and I could see his face. So he was pissed, and he just popped right up. I mean, just like toast out of a toaster. And he just took the gun like this and just slammed it on the back of my, or side back of my head, and pistol whipped me. And I remember like blood just started pouring out both sides of my head. And I do remember this. I put one hand here and it filled up with blood. I put another hand here and it filled up with blood. And then I thought, oh shit, I don't have any more hands. So it was just, you know, going all over the pavement. And they took off with my purse, drove away. The date guy, says there was two of them. The date guy, who had pretended this was like, you know, he got robbed too, but of course he didn't. I was like, well, I was passed out for a little bit, and then when I came to, it's like, he was just super in shock, like, or pretending he was in shock, and then he just sort of said, I'm gonna go get help, and he left a woman who was kneeling on the pavement with blood pouring out of her head. He just drove off in his truck. And then, ironically, as he was leaving the park, the police were coming in because there had been witnesses that I didn't know about. There were two guys playing basketball, and one of them came up and held my head and stopped the bleeding. And then another one called the police, and they were just amazing. And then there was this third guy who was very, very young, and he had a box full of kittens. And on the box it said free kittens, and he had taken the marker and put the driver's license, not the driver's license, the license plate number on the box. So he was able to tell the police that. And then to make a wrap up this part of it, it ended up, like, while I was in the ER, all these detectives came and they showed me this guy's driving record, and then of course it had his photo on it, and I recognized him because his ski mask had come off. And they ended up finding their car like abandoned, and it had all my credit cards and my purses dumped out. And I did have the weapon, but it had been empty. So I guess that had been the case. And then they did catch them like really fast after they identified the car. And that was like, that's gonna have to be another video. They did end up going to prison, but it's a whole other video because it was during COVID and lockdown, and I did go to some court hearings in person, but it was a long, drawn-out experience, and so was the parole experience, trying to because then they were up for parole after a year, and then I had to do all this stuff to keep them in there, or they would have gotten out. But you know, they only served 20% of their sentence because of overcrowding, and I guess, you know, one of them went to college during it or something. Anyway, that's the summary of what happened. I ended up in the news, and lucky me, they broadcast it back in my hometown, so, you know, everybody here got to see it, so that was awesome. And they didn't use my name, but one of the newspapers, I think there were 5 that printed it, because it was like kind of a catchy story, you know, because online dating is such a big deal about women and safety. So one of the papers accidentally leaked my last name, but it was only one of them. Anyway, the whole point about how I was able to turn these experiences into something that I'm not miserable about today was that when I was a kid, I used to read, well, my dad used to read stories to me, a lot of Grimm's fairy tales, and there used to be this one about Rumpelstiltskin. I don't know if you guys know this story, but it's kind of a silly story. It's about this young lady, and I guess she did something where she got in trouble, and she worked at a, like, she would take uh, straw and make things out of it. They would run it through this mill or something. It's like a big wheel, like a spinning wheel. And they asked her, they wanted her to make all these things for them, like the people who had, like, she owed money to or something. And she was like, oh my God, I can't do that. And all in one night, or, the few nights that they gave her. And then this little weird, strange elf guy shows up, and he says, still skinny, he says, oh, well, if you give me this or give me that, and he had all these stipulations, I'll help you make the straw turn into gold. And so, she fell for his tricks. I mean, the sad part of the story, when you were young, like I was when I heard it, was he ended up asking for her firstborn child. So she ended up having to give up her firstborn child to him. Whatever, that's neither here nor there. But the point of the story is, I always remembered that. I always remembered that image of him not making the straw into, like, honestly, I don't know what the hell they were making. I don't know if it was like weaving something. I don't know what straw clothes anybody would be wearing. Anyway, I just remembered the image of the spinning wheel and all the gold coins and gold, just like gold everywhere. And that he was just doing it. And somehow that image always stayed with me. And as other, like, bad experience happen in my life, I always thought, I love life. I enjoy life. Like, I am somebody who could be happy with just seeing, like, roses or something in somebody's garden. Like, I just am curious about life. I'm always fascinated with a million things, and there's always, like, so much more I always want to do. Like, I always want to travel everywhere and do everything, and, like, there's just no way I would ever be bored in this life, no matter what. And I just didn't want those people, and there's many of them, who betrayed me over the years. I didn't want them to take away my chance at life. I didn't want them, because they had hate and they were full of rage or whatever was going on with them, or if they felt like entitled, they felt like the world owed them. And in my mom's case, it was mental illness. She absolutely, I don't even know if she knew who I was, to be honest with you, because when I was a kid, my dad always took care of me, and anytime I was around her, which I would avoid her, she always just seemed like she wasn't interested in me at all. So there are pictures of us where she's holding me as a baby or a toddler, but I just don't have those memories of personal contact with her, even when we were living together. So that was just a super, like, miserable situation. Like, there's nothing that could be done with that situation. It just was never going to have a happy ending, or even, like, an okay ending. They always have these movies, and they drive me crazy, like on Lifetime or Hallmark or whatever, where, like, the adopted mother is, or the birth mother's dying, and then she wants to see the child again, who, she was estranged from or whatever. She didn't know because she'd given it away. And, they always have these, like, amazing endings where, like, they finally learn about each other, and they, forgiveness, and, like, that was just seriously just never gonna happen. When my mom got older, she did act better because she was in a nursing home, but it was never, She was in a nursing home because she tried to escape from one of the hospitals and fell and had a brain aneurysm, so she wasn't like 100% there. So it wasn't like there was going to be like this moment where we both made up or something. And, you know, Mother's Day when I was in school used to be the day I couldn't stand the most, because nowadays a lot of children live with their grandparents, but when I did, I didn't know a single person who did. It's not common. So what was my point about this? Oh, just that I believe 100% with God's direction and guidance in your life, to know that somebody who created you loves you purely and would do anything for you and spend time with you when nobody else will, and is there for you in like all your worst moments and all your best ones too. Somebody who never leaves your side. It just gave me so much hope. It made me feel like, well, the world is beautiful, but people maybe aren't, you know, or a lot of them aren't. But I still want to get as much out of it as possible. And so, you know, I would pray and ask for guidance to help me to like not lose my dreams and goals, and like my ability to, you know, like people and have relationships and just be part of this world. I was always an extrovert, and I didn't want to give all that up because there were people who didn't think like me, who weren't happy or grateful about the world, and they didn't care about you in any way, like at all, like you were like trash, like you were nothing. And that's not how I wanted to think of myself. I didn't want to think of myself as like something that could be thrown away, that had no worth. I wanted to see myself the way God saw me, as something beautiful that He created on purpose, that had meaning. And so that's why I've dedicated so much of my life to, like, you know, finding the silver lining in the darkest sky, even if it's thundering and lightning. And even if I know that more than likely something bad probably gonna happen to me again, and I'll have to go through it all over again, just to know I had that opportunity, that if something bad did happen, I knew that I could overcome it, you know, of course with the help of a higher spirit, but just to know that I would have another opportunity. I would conquer whatever happened, no matter how bad it was. And it helped me to learn to read and write again. It helped me to learn to do basic math again. It helped me to deal with all the naysayers who kept telling me I wasn't going to get better. You know, I had to accept reality, especially since it was not my first brain injury. And it helped me have hope and believe that honestly there's no one like you in the world. You're just like a snowprint. You're just like a snowflake or a fingerprint, right? They're both unique, and there isn't anyone else like you. And how cool is that, you know? And that I just didn't want to lose my opportunity to be happy. And that I was stubborn, and I was going to ask for direction, ask for support, ask for a way, find a way. And I always know that God makes a way. He can make a way out of nothing. When there is an impossible situation, He's the only one who can make a way. A human being can't. They can listen to you, they can give you advice, they can hug you, but they can't make a way. They can't make a way out of complete, absolute darkness when someone's taken away your ability to, like, do a basic function of your body. Person can't help you. Has to be something greater. All right, well, I'll post more in the future. Bye.